Have you ever felt like you're successful on paper, but behind closed doors, you're running on empty or feeling isolated or maybe even numbing out just to keep up the facade? You are not alone. Today's guest knows that pressure firsthand and what it takes to break free and lead with authenticity and purpose and connection.
Welcome to the Sober Life Rocks podcast. You may have made the decision not to drink alcohol, or at the very least, not at work-related events. Whether you've never been a drinker, are in recovery, or made a health-related decision, we see you, and you are not alone. In today's world, networking, socializing, and celebrations often happen over drinks, and the struggle can be real. Through this podcast, we're changing that narrative. We're here to create a community where individuals like you, who choose not to drink or drink less, can find camaraderie, support, and practical advice.
Before we dive in, I've got something exciting to share. Now, I know how it goes. You'll get to the end of this episode and forget to do this. So I won't be offended if you hit pause, go grab your ticket, and then come back. Amplify Sober Voices is just 2 months away. On January 15th in Orlando, which doesn't suck in January, speakers, writers, podcasters, coaches, and creators are coming together to spark ideas, to build collaborations, and really shape the future of the alcohol-free movement. Tickets can be found at Amplify Sober Voices, and then come right back. My guest today is Nick Jonsson. Nick is a global keynote speaker. He's a best-selling author and a mental health advocate ranked as the world's #1 thought leader on executive loneliness. He's the author of the international bestseller, Executive Loneliness, and the creator of the 5 Steps to Holistic Leadership Framework, which helps leaders integrate well-being and performance for long-term success. Now, with over 7 years of sobriety, Nick shares openly about his own struggles with addiction and isolation and burnout, and how recovery gave him clarity and resilience and a whole new way of leading. Today, he inspires leaders worldwide to trade silent suffering for authentic connection and sustainable leadership. Nick, welcome to the podcast.
So great to be here. Thank you, Margie.
And before we even dive in, where are you recording from? Where are you right now?
Well, I'm based in Southeast Asia, and I'm actually in Thailand, Phuket today.
Oh my goodness. Amazing, amazing. Well, thank you for coming on. How's tomorrow doing so far?
Yeah, it's doing beautiful. It's a great morning here, heading out for a bike ride after this.
Fabulous. I love that. So, Nick, I always love to start kind of just understanding what somebody's journey is like. And I find that it's fascinating to hear, what role did alcohol play in your family when you were growing up?
Yeah, thank you. And I would love to share that. And growing up in Sweden, very different from my life today. And in Sweden, I grew up seeing that, alcohol was part of celebration. It was something that adults did. My parents didn't drink on weekdays, for example, but it was something part of Christmas celebration, Easter, holidays, dinners, and so on. So I saw it just like one of those things to look forward to when I'm an adult, just like getting a driving license and having a car. That was sort of my perception of alcohol and drinking as a child.
And so then what was your kind of journey into that space?
Yeah, I started to play with it when I could, and wanting to do adult things in starting to try cigarettes perhaps around 15, 16 was one part, and then also when we could get hold of alcohol, we wanted to drink, we wanted to be adults, and yeah, jumping in the odd car with our friends as well as teenagers when the parents didn't look, so those were the kind of naughty things I did as a boy. And then eventually as I became 18, wow, it was legal and you could drink. So then, of course, I did it as much as I could on the weekends, especially. But increasingly, then it started to become popular even to go for an after work drink on a Wednesday and so on. And I perhaps liked it a little bit more than others already then. And then aged 23, I moved to Australia to study at university, a late starter. And there it was sunny and warm, and it felt like drinking beer all the time was socially acceptable and part of
And
life
fun.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and fun.
exactly. So it was
Yeah.
fun, normalized. So it was never not any problems for me by so far. It was just that it was quite a lot of it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so then what happened where it started to not be so good for you?
Yeah, I can remember at university days, I put a lot of pressure on myself, and I worked really hard to get a scholarship, and that I achieved that about halfway in my studies. And then, in order to maintain this scholarship, I had to keep a certain grade, and I put so much pressure on myself to deliver that, and that anxiety inside me. I didn't know how to deal with those emotions, and I learned that, yeah, well, if I'm drinking some beer when I do my assignments and the work and so on, then I can relax a little bit. So I started to use it as a medication during my studies, and then of course at parties. And also, since it was normal to do it even during the day, I could also drink during the beer. So it just beer during a game of golf, for example. So it just became too much all the time. A few years later, then I remember the first episodes when it gave me a big problem, and that was in 2004. I was then working and living in Bangkok, Thailand, and had had a very big weekend. I remember coming into the office on a Monday morning, my heart just rushing, and I just had to leave and go to hospital. And the
Mm,
doctor then actually diagnosed it for hypertension, high blood pressure, and all these kind of things, and high cholesterol. Gave me a lot of medication. The alcohol was never acknowledged or realized, but looking back now, I realize that was when it started to get problematic.
wow. Now, fast forward me to 7 years ago. Was there an event that happened, or what caused you to make a new choice?
Yeah, well, we could say about 10 years ago, a fall started. I had been, by that time, drinking too much. It affected my health, my relationships, and everything else. And I resigned from a job because I couldn't handle the pressure. I also then, when I was challenged at home from my wife questioning why I resigned from this job, I couldn't explain myself. I then filed for a divorce. So with that,
Mm,
I isolated myself, and basically over 2, 3 years, spending a lot of time alone, jumping from job to job, failing, and just drinking way too much. I was going down,
mm,
down, down until I hit my rock bottom. You could say it's when I was, as we say in the world of recovery, many times I was sick and tired of being sick and tired.
absolutely. So tell me then, you got sober. How long was it until you were willing to tell other people?
So I that was the biggest challenge here because I tried to keep it secret for the longest time, and that's why for 3 years I was
Mhm,
very sick until I become a day drinker, morning drinker, and I had to medicate myself just to get by. And I tried my very best not to tell anyone, but hiding it. But eventually the pain was so great that I had no choice. And at that time I'd met a new woman who became my wife, and we
mm,
are happily married today. And I decided to tell her. And after I just told her, things got easier. We then went to a doctor where she helped me to also share what happened there. I shared it with a friend, and then in a recovery community where I got some support, and that's where I kept it for about 1 year. So quite confidential, quite anonymous for about 1 year.
mm,
And just after the year mark, something happened. I lost a friend of mine. He died of suicide, and at that
mm.
time, um, I realized that that was perhaps the path I was on if I didn't get the help. So that's when I decided to speak up more about my own recovery.
And what was that like? And what kind of reactions did you get?
Yeah, so uh, people, when I start to speak up publicly about it, that I've had an alcohol problem, and talking about burnout and all these kind of issues that came with it, and suicide and so on, people said that I shouldn't talk about this because I would damage my career, my reputation, my brand. These were things that I should keep to myself. That was one school of thought that some people tried to stop me. But that's when I made actually a LinkedIn post, a video in 2019 about this, where I shared about my journey and my work in this space now to trying to break the stigma discussing it. And I got an overwhelming positive response. It actually went viral, and people from all around the world wrote to me and supported me and shared on me and said, we need to talk about this. And the media also jumped on it. So very quickly, from having just shared on social media, I was on radio, TV, interviews, newspapers, then talking about loneliness, isolation, addictions, and so on. So that's how I fell into becoming this sort of brand ambassador, speaking about the beautiful world of recovery.
Wow. What a crazy story. I mean, my story is that I got sober 20 years ago, and back then the stigma was really bad. And you just didn't talk about it. You just didn't. And at 10 years sober, I thought, it's been long enough, really. And so I had an opportunity to speak on a stage, and I sort of incorporated why getting sober was so powerful to me and why it fueled me to be there for other people. And like you, I got some good response, but I also had two people who were very influential at that meeting come up to me and say, good job with your talk, but you really shouldn't talk about that sober thing. And that was enough for me to go, nope, not going to do that again. And so in total, I was secretly sober for 18 years. Like I maybe had 4 or 5 people in my professional community who knew, and they knew it was confidential as well. So it was just a really tough time, and it felt like another piece of shame to be sober and be ashamed of that. And so I'm always fascinated to hear like how people navigated through that because the last thing you want is for people to judge you and think that you're not competent, which is absurd because of course we're twice as competent, but that's the story we tell ourselves. Like, how can we undo that story?
Yeah, and then thank you for sharing your story there, Margie. It's very powerful indeed, and that's what sort of I sensed as well, right? That there was a few people that tried to stop me, but what happened in my case was that the fact that I had lost a friend to suicide just at that juncture when I was 1 year sober, that that sort of anger I had having lost him, I had so much energy inside me, so much drive, and I said I was driven by a purpose towards the cause that we must talk about this, that I just ignore them. But if that incident had not have happened, I might not have gone as far as answering the calls from
Mm.
the journalists and getting on those radio interviews. But those radio interviews and TV interviews and stories are out there forever, so I couldn't turn back time, right? And that's when some said, Nick, you will never get a job in the corporate world again after what you've done. And of course I had some fear then, but then again, for the greater cause, I felt it was the right thing. But if we're looking back, as you say, it's so much stigma, so much shame, and even some of the recovery groups, they call themselves anonymous, and that means to me that it's almost like a secret society, and you
Yeah.
have to hit rock bottom to qualify to be a member. And I find it so sad that it has to be like that. So we need more people like you who are out there and talking about, as you say, like sober life, do indeed rock.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
what
thank you. Thank you. Because really, I mean, our mission is not to get anybody sober. It People will choose to do that or not. And there are so many amazing coaches and recovery groups and, the anonymous groups and all those things. Our mission is really just to normalize the conversation and to normalize people who choose to be alcohol free, being able to go to conferences and not have the only option be sticky soda or water. So I'm 100% on board with you. Like, let's just start talking about it. And it kind of leads me to my next question because you talk about sobriety as your superpower. And I would love to know sort of what does that mean to you and tell me more.
Yeah, alcohol always made me fall short. It sort of was the one thing that just made it. I didn't really shine through with it in my life, and in all areas of my life, it was sort of a bit of a struggle there. But
Can I
having
interrupt you just
removed,
for a second?
yeah.
Did you think that it was the alcohol that was getting in your way back then?
Oh no, I was in complete denial about that. I thought it was all kind of things, and especially I thought it was other people or companies or other events. It was not nothing to do with me. Yeah, that's
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So I blamed everything but the alcohol, right? But once I was forced to remove that and being sober, then it just opened up the whole world. Everything was just so much easier, from relationships with my parents, with family, making amends with my ex-wife. The relationship didn't work for 13 years. We now have a better relationship than we ever had when we were married. a relationship with my son. So he moved with my ex-wife when we separated. We also have a wonderful relationship and managed to reconnect with my parents and so on. But also in my life, my healthy life, I'm about 60 pounds lighter now compared to when I was drinking. Feeling healthier, fresher, better, and also all my sports. So I used to always love to do sport. And I remember, wanting to run a marathon, then I would force myself to white knuckle, no drinking for 3 weeks so I can run the race. And then at the finish line, the first thing I would do would be to drink. So I would destroy myself celebrating with beer and champagne at the finish line and then have a hangover after that. Now life is so different. It doesn't have to be that stressful and hectic. I can actually perform better in all areas of my life. So it is indeed my superpower.
Absolutely. I can't tell you. I remember thinking, how do I'm smart. I've always been a smart, intelligent person. But things used to be so how do normal people do their taxes? How do they figure out how to get their license renewed? Because it seemed so challenging. It seemed like all of these things just I had to muscle my way through. And after I got sober, I was like, what was the big deal? It's very obvious. You just follow these steps in a timely manner. You don't wait till it's a crisis. You don't wait till you're paying late fees on everything. Yeah, it is absolutely a superpower. So I want to know because getting sober is hard. Staying sober is less hard, but it still is something that I feel like even today, I still have some practices that I do. So, what are some of the practices that you do? You've talked about exercise, but really for that inner person who self medicated in the past, those things don't go away. So, what are some ways that you take care of yourself?
Yeah, so it's certainly, being up early, like I'm up early today, exercising and getting community. I'm an introvert myself, so I could easily isolate and very comfortable with that. But what I learned is that that doesn't mean that that's the best for me. So I look after my physical health by being disciplined to exercise, move in some shape or form every day. But I also discipline myself to meet social connection every day. And because we have limited day time every day, my bike ride today after this will be with a group of people. So I will combine then the exercise with the social health. And after the bike ride, we will have a coffee. So I will start my day
Mhm.
with physical health and also mental health. Of course, we're going to be cycling in the forest, connecting with the nature and so on. So that is how I look after myself. And also I'm quite open with my challenge. If I'm going through a difficult time, then I share that. Like I lost a friend of mine this week, but I didn't bottle up. I didn't keep it secret. I shared it even with my parents. I shared it with some mutual friends. We had conversations. I reached out to my dad last night. So I normalized it by talking about my feelings rather than
Mhm.
suppress them and drink on them.
Mm, love that. That is so important. So now I want you to share with me a little bit about this executive loneliness because I think that it's not exclusionary executives. I think all of us, especially post-pandemic, have they call it the loneliness epidemic going on right now. So talk about how you got into that, what some of the work is you do, and maybe also how it translates to the solopreneur.
Yeah, so as I was, falling off and crashing down towards my rock bottom, I was lonely. I was isolated in my role. And in recovery, then I was looking back, what was it that really set wheels in motion? Why did I go so low? And it was about 1 year in a job where I had been promoted to general manager, which meant suddenly I wasn't sitting with my colleagues anymore. I had been moved up in a bigger office on the corner. And I was separated from my team and also more distant from them. The challenges poured on me, and I just didn't know how to cope with it, and I just became isolated. So that was the space I was in. I wasn't also in a company where we had the supportive culture of speaking up and being vulnerable. I remember coming to my boss once or twice and asking for help on some things, and she basically said, "Nick, we pay you to sort that out." So she didn't want to know about my challenges. So with that, I was left by myself to deal with it, and I just couldn't cope in the end. So as I identified then the challenges and looked into many more cases, I found that if the culture is that it's closed and we don't talk, and that isolation can be deadly in the workplace. So that's why I started to then research and interview people about loneliness in the workplace, Margie. And indeed, I also found that it can be at every level of the organization. But I also found that if we want to change that, it has to start from the top. We will not have new recruits or managers coming in and changing the culture in the organization. It need to be the CEO who or the managing directors at the top and the owners of the organization who are ready to change the culture. So with that, then that's why I wrote the book pitched at that level for them to actually address it. These days, I'm also certified in psychological safety. So I'm coming into teams to doing right this, to change the culture, to being more connected, more open, rather than having that closed culture, which I went
It's
through.
interesting because you particularly focus on Asia, Southeast Asia. I did some training in Singapore, and there were people there who were from China and Japan and Korea and Singapore. And this was a C-suite group, and we were trying to help them be more communicative about the bigger vision and be more communicative about the bigger strategy, but also be more inclusive in discussions about the tactics. How could they empower their people to do these things? And we got in a conversation about how do you help them feel more motivated?
Hmm.
And these were middle-aged men, and they sort of turned their head at me. They're like, "What do you mean?" And so how do you get people feeling energetic and excited to work on this new direction? And they sort of blinked at me because in their culture, you ask somebody to do something, they did it, right? There's no motivation or no questioning. And I said, well, what would it be like if you saw something that they did that was really good and thanked them? And they said, why? And so we spent about an hour brainstorming ways that they could authentically show appreciation without sort of breaking this taboo about having emotion at the workplace. And it was a real struggle. So because you work in that area, like this must be a really uphill battle.
It is indeed, and as you say, it is that directive leadership in Asia, much more so in Asia than it is in the Western world, and it's very directive, top driven, big power difference there. And I just came back from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, where I did 4 days of trainings this week just on this topic, and to find out, how can these leaders engage the team more. And it is really like teaching children almost, in the sense that how to have a coaching conversation, how to listen. And it's not just to listen and pause, it's also to reflect back and so on. So I'm training them on these very basic skills and doing role plays so that they actually can come back into the workplace to test these skills. So it's way behind the Western world, but with baby steps, it is finally they are understanding that it's actually better for the work culture. We get more productivity, less staff turnover, less sick days, and all these kind of things if we can address this.
Yeah. I mean, that was one of the things we talked about, was that this particular company was not at the top of the pay scale of their competitors in the region. And so they said, people were leaving in droves to go chase the higher paycheck. And I said, well, what would happen if you gave them such a great culture to work in that the money doesn't become the primary driver? And that was the only thing that got them motivated, was to thinking about it could be a benefit that they could offer. So it's challenging.
Absolutely, Margie, and that's what I lead with when I sell in these proposals, these trainings, and so on. I lead with the benefits. Are you looking at decreasing your staff turnover with 20%? Yes, I am. I want to affect the bottom line. Okay, well then we need to have a conversation about engagement in your company, for example. Yeah.
So help me translate some of what you teach to, like, I'm a solopreneur. Um, I have two businesses, and one I have a business partner and one I don't. But in all cases, I'm the leader. And in all cases, people are looking to me to be the expert, which I am. But at the same time, I don't have anybody else to lean on. And at times that can feel lonely. It can feel like I'm the only one, 1-800 call Margie. But who does Margie call? So what are some of the principles that you teach that would be translatable to people like me? Because most of our audience either has their own business or they are sort of mid-level, not necessarily C-suite.
I love to share this, Marjorie, because when my book came out, Executive Loneliness, then while it was selling really well to the executive world and the corporates and so on, and it still is, then many of the entrepreneurs and solopreneurs ask, but what about us? We are lonely too. In fact, we're even more lonely. So
Yeah.
it is can be very lonely there. And I've been talking at a lot of SME conferences all around Asia on this topic. And what I do also then is to share how I connect myself these days and how I recommend everyone else to do it. And it is by having multiple safe spaces. And in my workshops also, we map out our personal safe spaces where we can have personal conversations and professional safe spaces. And it can be everything from belonging as a professional speaker. I belong to the Singapore Professional Speaking Association. I'm also a mentor and volunteer for many of the others around in Asia. So I connect with fellow speakers. And I'm even going to speak at the Maldives Professional Speaker Retreat in next month on this topic to help them to feel connected in their communities. But it's also about having safe spaces personally. Like I've set up a men's group where we are now, as of today, 21 men in this men's group. It's a WhatsApp group where each of us check in every morning. We write our gratitude list and share what we are grateful for, which is a way to be vulnerable and to be appreciative and to connect with others. We then have regular Zoom meetings where we can log on and share what are the challenges we're facing in our life, so that we normalize the feelings. And when we go through challenges, we have that as a safe space. So rather than bottle up, we have that safe space. So it's about for everyone to think about, okay, what's my field, what's my profession, which are the associations I can join, who are perhaps having similar conversations, are there any mastermind groups, peer groups out there? And if it's not, it's very simple to open one,
Start with.
set one up and invite people like-minded, and it only takes 2-3 people to get a group started, and then ask them, can you bring in 1 or 2 of your friends or regulars who have a similar challenge as well, and then you can get going.
Ugh, I love that so much. Yeah, masterminds have been my saving grace, because who else can you really talk about what some of these real challenges are? And you don't have to recreate the wheel all the time. There's other people who've done it before you. So that's beautiful. Um, what's next for you? Like,
Yeah,
how do you hope that your conversations are going to move forward?
yeah, I'm constantly being curious about my journey, and also I'm looking back at which decisions did I make in my life based on trying to please others, or the fear of walking my own way. And that's deep job I done with my coach and also with my mentors and so on. And I realized that when I started at university, age 23, I studied a degree in communication, but actually my heart wanted to study psychology then. And I realized that I asked a few friends for their opinion, and they said, "Oh no, that's too difficult for you, Nick. You shouldn't study that." And I didn't. So now I just turned 50, and I did a job last year with a coach where I went over all these big decisions, and I turned back time. So rather than being 50 now, I'm 23 years of age, and I have actually started to study psychology, and I'm 1 year in, so I will graduate from a postgraduate diploma in psychotherapy and counseling by end of this year, so that I can have even more deeper and more qualified conversations. I
Yeah.
specialize then in addiction and also in suicide risk assessment and prevention.
Wow. Wow. So 5, 10 years from now, where's Nick going to be?
Well, I hope to still be this sort of nomad supporting individuals and by private work one-on-one in recovery work. I work with a lot of men to help them in recovery, and I hope to continue with that. And then also supporting teams to connect them to be more open and vulnerable and comfortable to be themselves in the workplaces.
Mm, love that so much. And, the workplace is so important that we're able to be authentic. And um, I've talked to a number of people who've talked about this workplace safety, and it really does have to come from leadership. If you aren't role modeling and giving people permission and all of that, they're not going to speak up and they're not going to feel safe, for sure. So before we close, I did want to ask you, our podcast is all about helping people to amplify their sober voice. And so in today's world in 2025, if somebody is listening and says, you know what, I want to start speaking up too. I want to start speaking up at my workplace, or I want to start speaking up as a speaker or write a book, like what would you recommend?
Well, I would recommend them to talk to someone who is in that space, and someone like yourself who's been that journey, or they can talk to me. I'm happy to share my learnings and have a private call with someone who want to explore the sober journey, or having any of those kind of conversations. There's plenty of us out there who's willing to listen.
1000%. And was there anything else we didn't talk about that you would love to bring up?
I think you covered a lot of ground in this conversation, and I just want to share that I'm very grateful to be here. And if any listener is sitting there thinking that, I also have a drinking problem, I have an issue, but I don't know what to do, well, ask for help. Again, there's many people out there. The beautiful recovery, the world of recovery workers are there. There's a lot of volunteers and people who will actually listen, and a lot of it is free. The first step is,
Mhm.
with these groups, is you can join anonymously and you can speak up.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that message. It's really important. You know, as we wind up, I'm reflecting on all the things we've talked about, and it kind of comes down to like, it's not about carrying our loads alone, whether that's as a leader, whether that's as an entrepreneur, or as a person just walking through life. We don't have to do it alone. It's about connection and all the ways you talked about connecting and being willing to speak up and tell the truth about what we're going through. So here's my question for you listeners. Where in your own life are you holding it all together on the outside, but running scared or lonely on the inside? And what would shift if you let your alcohol-free decisions become your superpower? Fueling not just your health, but your leadership, your relationships, your whole life. And if you're ready to step into that kind of impact, you belong at Amplify Sober Voices. If you are or want to be a speaker or a writer, a podcaster, or any kind of change maker, come together with us and join in that essential community on January 15th in Orlando. It's where connections are going to be made, where ideas will be sparked, where collaborations are going to happen. And I'm just so excited to bring all of the people in this world who want to be a leader in this space together. So go to amplifysobervoices.com to grab your ticket and join us. And if this episode moved you, if you know somebody else who needs to hear it, please subscribe it, share it, leave a review. You never know who is suffering in silence and needs to hear this message. Nick, thank you again.
Thank you very much.